So what happens when you give a voice to the voiceless with your business is people feel seen, felt, and heard. And they want to be around you because you show them a part of themselves that no one else allowed them to see. And so as you're creating your business, the more you can see and hear them and get deeper with them to know what's really at the core, the more you'll speak into the culture and culture will take it over and do it with you. So it's not just about effort. What we like to do is get busy during times of emotion. What we like to do is figure out like projects we could do in our business, or like blame other people for what's going on, become victims, like all that kind of stuff is part of the human process, because we as humans do a really good job taking responsibility when the stakes are low, but the higher the stakes become, and the more that doesn't align with how we view ourselves and our own ID, the more we start to project that onto other people so that we don't have to deal with ourselves. The world doesn't really feel like it's okay for wealthy people to have emotions. They don't feel like it's okay for wealthy people to be able to process those, because who are you to complain? What do you have to complain about? So just tuck it in because someone else has a life that's worse than yours and dealing with more difficult things. And, you know, the things I heard as a kid was there's people starving in Africa and all these kind of stories. And then what we do is we hold that in, and it starts to eat away at us, at our health, at our level of connection to ourselves and the way we view ourselves and whether we love ourselves or whether we express love to other people. And here's the detriment, is that we start to feel like the world is an unsafe and unfair place. We feel misunderstood, and this is why wealthy, successful entrepreneurs feel lonely, because they don't feel like it's okay to say, I don't feel well. What do you have to complain about? Who knows? Maybe it's stuff from your childhood that you've been trapping inside. We hide behind the notion of business in our world today. Everybody says things like, it's not personal, it's business. Since when is it not personal? Since when has a business ever written a check? There's always someone's name on the check. There's always someone that had agreed to send that out. There's always a person that determined to have, whether it's an answering machine or whether it's an AI that's communicating with you. It was human beings that decided to do business. And somehow along the way, people decided that we could hide behind business and have a lack of integrity and want something for ourselves at the expense of another. These are people that you would see, great people in the community. They might donate their time. They might be loved and adored by their friends and their family and their spouse. But somehow, if we remove ourselves from personal and put it as business, then all of a sudden we become assholes. And we decide that we could get away with anything because it's business. And the notion and the rules of business have been zero-sum game. Take what you can. Everyone's out to get you. So get it while it's good. And ultimately, if they're wrong, then you're justified in every action that you take. And I'm going to raise my hand that for 13 hours, I was ready to play that game. I didn't sleep one night. I'm like, I'm going to be manipulative then. I'm gonna play chess instead of checkers. I'm gonna get mine. I started to think that way until I finally, in the morning, was like, if I do that, then I'm 100% in a losing game, lost who I am. And here's the hard thing, but the important thing. A, what is it gonna take for me to get to a place to truly wanna see them succeed and be able to live a good life? Number two, how could I be fully grateful for all of the good that came along the way? Number three, as I look at this entire situation, how can I make sure never to allow that become a fuel for me to become competitive or have a chip on my shoulder? This is another way that people look at business and sports. How many athletes get a chip on their shoulder so they can be miserable even after they win? Most athletes are more upset when they lose than joyful when they win. Some of the best names we have, because they live by the chip on the shoulder. And in my one-man show, I talk about a chip on the shoulder may be motivating initially, but it leads to bitterness and anger and feeds a feeling of lack and scarcity. Here's the thing. We're in this game of business with a losing premise that we have something to prove to other people. And if we could just do something that they didn't think we could do, that will win the game. But when we get there and we've checked those boxes, it feels extraordinarily empty, especially when we find that it brought us less love, not more. Proving something to someone else doesn't have them go, oh my God, I was so wrong about you. Let me hug you and tell you how great you are. It actually pushes them away further because you're not looking at them, listening to them, seeing them, or understanding who they are as a human. You're too busy proving something wrong, and you are the container of the poison. You're not poisoning them. What I realized, and I don't know if I've talked to this group about this before, but this was such a breakthrough and aha for me, is that I've gone through my life so often in the competitive nature, the masculine nature of being alpha. Alpha means I can give, I've got solutions, I'm gonna charge through. First off, that could be very exhausting for the people around you. But here was the thing I didn't understand. I thought beta meant being weak. And when we think beta means being weak, we hide from the moment of how we really feel and we put on a front. And that is that false bravado. That's that fake, I've got it all figured out. And what it does is it prevents us from the very answers from the people that we love or know because they can't serve us when we don't let them in. And so instead, I look at alpha as giving and beta as receiving. How good are you at receiving? I want you to really examine this for a minute. When you help someone because they ask for your support and you care about them, after you've helped them, do you feel better or worse about yourself? Better. I mean, it's obvious when we say it. It's the elusive obvious when we're in the emotion, because the emotion blocks the level of intelligence we have around this. So this is something I want everyone to hold me accountable to, and I really want to be in my life, is the people I am so deeply bonded to in this world, like deeply bonded to, are the people that I showed up for when nobody else would show up for them, or they were down and out and the world was backing away because they didn't want to hurt their reputation being around this individual, or they didn't want to be associated. And we have so much fear based upon what we think others might think about us for supporting that person. And look, maybe those people have done things wrong and maybe it's not always great, but what I know is that's the time I bond most deeply. When because for someone to reach out when they would never reach out takes such an act of courage and has them become so vulnerable that when you can show up loving and contributing, like I have someone that has sent thousands, literally thousands of paid clients over the last decade to my company. He hit a point where his business was in such disarray that he was going to the hospital with massive anxiety. And he had made a dozen people's business from nothing, just being associated with him, like a dozen at least. And most of them were my clients. So I called them and said, this person needed help. And who better to invest in if we support them financially and emotionally? Because as soon as they could remove the scarcity and know that they've been there for us, that we could be there for them, guess how many of the dozen people gave him $1? None. And so I went to my wife and I said, hey, look, he needs 200 grand. It's an investment in him. We've made way more than that with him. But I showed up and I gave him the money. Now I'm here to tell you it took him longer to pay me back. And the hardest thing for him was he was so disappointed in himself for not paying it that I had to regularly communicate and say, hey, just so you know, I know you're worried about the money. Can we just set that aside for another month? I know you're working on it. And just have dinner and just be okay about it? He's like, I know, but I feel so guilty and bad. I'm like, look, let me tell you a story. In 2008, I was over leveraged. I was launching Killing Sacred Cows, and I just led with my mistakes. I just shared with him the times that I was late of paying someone back. But I knew we were cut from the same cloth, and I eventually paid them back. It just took me longer than I planned. So what would it take to show up for people in their worst moments? Like, I feel like so many people in this world are known for their worst moment. And I sure am glad that not everybody knows my worst moment. I'm sure glad that's not how people label me, is by my worst moment. What I'm trying to say here is pain is proximity. It brings us closer to the lesson that we can't pay attention to until we go through the experience. And if we can go through that experience and see it as a gift, no matter how painful, it actually becomes a sharpening of our soul if we allow other people to support us. It becomes a resentment of the world if we stay isolated. So who's got your back? Who do you trust? Are you willing to open up? I want you to look at this in your own business and in your own life. I didn't speak up when my intuition said to speak up. I was like, I'll just be a good team player. I'll just do it. And every time I didn't speak up, I became more robotic and disconnected from the very thing that I started because I was afraid to ruffle feathers, or to say what was real. And so that's my responsibility. But no matter how smart we are, we have these areas that because we were kids, didn't process the emotion, we learned the wrong lesson, and we project that forward, and then we blame others. This is the crux of the world. People that were hurt as kids that are projecting that out to the rest of the world. And here's where you're hurt as a child if you want to figure it out. What do you complain about most? Who are you blaming for the things that are not ideal in your life? What are the things you consistently are in judgment about with everyone else? Where do you have a feeling of hate, anger, resentment? Any of that, by the way, that is the story letting you know the things you have not healed. It's what you haven't healed. And it's not that there aren't good stories of why you're justified. It's not that there was maybe wrongdoing or things you couldn't defend at the time and the age that you were. But the question is, are you ready to heal and live the life that you love? Anything where we're proving something to someone else is simply something we haven't accepted in ourselves. I just remember we're in an immersion and someone said, I want to double my business in the next 3 years. And I was like a little annoying kid. Why? After 20 minutes, he's like, so my dad will tell me that he loves me. Cool. Well, that's not going to do it. That's not what's going to happen. Like, if we can get to where the root of this is, here's some of the questions. When was the first time you felt you were alone? What happened? What's your first memory of money? When was the first time you felt unsafe? When was the first time you lied to protect someone else? When did someone first let you down? Where did you first feel out of control? There's so many things that happen in kids' lives. Hit by a car at 3, at 4 years old, or 5 years old, get molested at 6 or 7. My cousins say, think I'm asleep, saying what a nerd and dork I am, and they don't like me. Like, all these things, we think that they're insignificant when we're adults because we should know better. But the problem is we stunt our maturity at the moment we try to protect ourselves. We stunt our maturity by saying, I'll never let this happen again. And anything and everything that reminds us of that day or that moment becomes a trigger. I love the show The Town. It's directed by Ben Affleck. And he's talking to this girl that he's dating, and she says, a sunny day. But she says it really in a depressed way. He goes, what do you mean? Yeah, just another sunny day. My brother died on a day like this. So now a sunny day reminds her of the death of her brother. That's the thing. All this stuff is so subtle. Playing not to lose is a subtlety. It's not the obvious thing. It could be obvious to outside people, but to us, it's just we think we're doing what's best and what's right. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings. We want to be a team player. We have all the right justifications of why we do what we do, how we go about doing it. And when we're in anger, frustration, resentment, or sadness, or any unprocessed emotion, we make illogical, irrational choices and justify it by sugarcoating it with we're doing the right thing because we're a good person. I'm the good guy. Come on, we all know there's 3 sides to a story. And here's the deal. I have to learn, to be honest in all situations, even if it might hurt someone's feelings. I can learn how to be honest without being piercing. But being reserved and not saying will just create a bigger mess in the future. Your intuition is always fulfilling, but rarely convenient. It's rarely convenient. And by the way, tough conversations and courage, it's never going to be convenient. And another line from the play is, I'm like, we make future moments and projects so big, we pretend there isn't time for anything else. But we always make time for funerals. We always make time for weddings. We always make time for birthdays. But we don't make time for the biggest conversations because we're afraid of having them. And part of that might be because of something that happened when we were kids. And this is where I'm going to be just a little bit on the airy-fairy side, because my wife's like, hey, you should talk to this woman, Allison. So I meet with Allison. Allison can tell just by watching me on Zoom. She can tell my neurology runs hot and I'm trying to do everything right. And she's like, can you just relax? And I was like, okay. And then she's like, we'll really relax. And it took our whole first call was her reading me like a book and me being annoyed that it was just that apparent to her. But second call, she says, have you ever talked to your mom about your birth? I'm like, no. And so I call my mom. I'm like, hey, I'm working with this therapist and I just want to hear about the birth. My mom's like, well, the cord wrapped around your neck, you stopped breathing. The cord wrapped around my neck, I stopped breathing. They hit me in the face with the forceps and my lip swells, it's bleeding. They finally get me out. They have to palpitate me with fingers. 2 fingers, and then they rip me out of my mom's arms and I don't get to be held for 24 hours. I'm a baby. I shouldn't remember that. But once I figured that out, I realized all my reasons for doing illogical, irrational things was because of fear of abandonment. I people pleased out of a fear of abandonment. I smooth things over out of fear of abandonment. I'm not as bold as I could be because of a fear of abandonment. And once I figured that out, it's weird because I just did a cranial sacral session with somatic therapy, and I've had zero fear of abandonment ever since. I was worried about, am I going to live a life of congruency? And am I going to be able to live a life of expression? Or I'm going to be suppressed based upon someone else's expectations and conditions? And then I had to look at myself and say, I'm frustrated about this because I'm too conditional, because I have too many expectations. And that, I have a best friend that moved away a couple years ago. It was really hard on him. He didn't want to disappoint me. I'm like, that's how I'm showing up to people? They don't want to disappoint me by living their best life because I want them around me? I just start examining some of that behavior and realize maybe when someone leaves early, that's what's best for them, and don't try to get them to stay or I just started to look at it as letting people be more of who they are and finding a way to co-create a way that we could invest time together or be around each other, but not out of expectation and not out of manipulation, because nobody feels fulfilled out of manipulation. So I'm looking at this pain as a gift because it led me to do a lot of writing, a lot of spiritual work, a lot of difficult conversations, feel very close to the people that really care for me. And I've got to tell you, I felt like the universe provided. People were calling this feels like an information marketing company. You feel more soulful than the videos that are coming out here. It was just constant bombardment from people I care about. And instead of justifying, defending, or saying no, for once, I listened. And anyone seen this book, Unreasonable Hospitality? Look, Unreasonable Hospitality, the guy just got, Will is his name. They just named his restaurant the best restaurant in the world. And it's in New York City. And I got to see him speak 2 weeks ago. And it forever changed me, hearing him speak and what he talked about. I just realized I'm too busy in my mind managing something. And instead, what if I was just in a place of this winning game where it was all about co-creation, elements of surprise, and connection? That's like being friends with our customers instead of them just being a person on Zoom that I don't get to see. Watching Will and hearing some of his stories, for example, one of the stories I shared with Corey is they created dream weavers at their restaurant. And so as soon as someone books their restaurant, they start researching them. They found out this couple that came into the restaurant was supposed to have a wedding. The families didn't get along, so they eloped. So what they did is they slow rolled them through the restaurant so that they were the last ones to leave, found out their wedding song, took them upstairs where all of the waitstaff was now in their street clothes versus their uniforms, and had a DJ play the song while they danced together. And that was how they finished their night at the restaurant. I was like, that's what I want. That's why immersions, because we can actually have these unique experiences that still we think of on a daily basis. I mean, my last immersion, I'm going to be I don't know that this was the best idea, but I've never been more of myself because first off, Jordan Peterson was in town, so I took him to see Jordan, and my wife wanted to see Jordan, so then we went to this restaurant where he and my wife started drinking and got to know each other. And it was, she's got a potty mouth, we'll say, worse than mine, but he didn't care, And then we go up to the cabin, and it was Trisha's birthday. So we took the Can-Am into the town, singing Pearl Jam at the top of our lungs in the Can-Am, and then I was like, hey, if we get done, one of my friends is having a party. I got so drunk, he had to drive me home. And so he stayed at our house that night and then worked out with us the next morning. And he just sent us the card where he's like, thanks for letting me all the way in. And I mean, we ended up working out together. We ended up getting a cold plunge. He ended up using this Harambe. There's these things that are in his life every single day. And he's texting me almost every day. And so that's the level of intimacy that I want with what we're doing here. And I will share even I mentioned I had a hemorrhoid because I didn't get my book done. I mean, I'll share You guys are like, maybe we don't want to know Garrett this well. Maybe there's some line that we should draw. But the reality is we all have warts. We have these situations, and we look at other people's lives thinking it's the life that we want. But even if we could copy that life, it won't be the life that we want. It's their life. And it's not even their life. It's how they portray their life. It's not everything that they are. It's only what we are allowed to see. And what I want to do is create shared moments where we have connection, where we have vulnerability, and it feels monumental, even if it's just a moment that we really feel connected, that we could reference as the starting point and the point we could count on in our relationship. That you could count on us, even if you're in that moment where you're like, I feel like I'm at rock bottom all of a sudden. I feel like I'm losing my identity. I feel like I'm in a losing game. I feel like I made a major mistake. I don't know what to do next. Let us be there. Let's talk. We won't tell anyone. Nobody needs to know, but it's nice that you know that if you're looping, you can reach out. So in a little bit of summary here, alpha is giving, beta is receiving. How good are you at receiving? And what would it take to become a better receiver? Because it's the gift where you let other people give. You let other people show up. Pain is a sharpening of our soul. It's what lets us harvest and learn lessons. We don't have to learn every lesson through pain, but sometimes it brings us to the proximity of things that we would never ask or go through otherwise. Make sure you're harvesting all those lessons during that time, and when you get in the loop, ask for help. Someone can ask you a question you can't ask yourself to find the answer that's already within. And if you're in play to win, like candidly, after this was all over, I took some mushrooms at my cabin, and it took me through a process where everything was slow with the music, slowed down. But it let me feel the frenetic striver of trying to hustle and grind, and it was suffocating. I couldn't breathe, and I was standing up, and I was laying down, and I was like, what is all this? Where's this coming from? And it was like, this is generations of worry. This is generations of isolation. This is the wrong process for far too long. This is holding on to things and resentments, and this is lack of responsibility, and this is where you don't fully accept and love yourself, and this is where you judge yourself for the mistakes, and this is where you still want other people to do things that they didn't do, putting your agenda on them. And I was like, oh, there it is, an agenda. An agenda society passed down to me that I thought would make me more lovable, and it turned out it made me more difficult to be around. And so I'm working on how can I have less conditions and unwritten expectations and listen? How can I be more in co-creation rather than frustration? Where can I speak up when it's inconvenient, but it's required for the growth of both parties? And maybe the hard things to speak up about are lessons for you and the person you're speaking to, not just you. Maybe you've got the key to show them something. You know, like they say in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. The problem is if we're too busy in resentment and frustration and anger and pointing out problems and complaining and difficulty and all that, we lose our power and we lose our peace. Money Unmasked came out, and I've never been less in pain about a book launch and more excited about a book. That's a strange phenomenon for me. And what it showed me recently in the frenetic nature of everything's slower and I'm running was I've just been a master at creating artificial deadlines, artificial timelines that nobody cares about but me. And then I want other people to care about it, and then we're all in stress because I invented some deadline. And so October 3rd comes, was it October, what, I don't even know. Yeah, October 3rd comes and Money Unmasked comes out. And I'm just like, I had my friends in town. I was like, we're definitely not going to push to do a big launch for October 3rd. Like, we have the basic website done. We have things happening in December for financial advisors. But I'm not like, in the past, I would be hitting the phones. I'd be, exhausting myself. And I've just let it breathe. And by letting it breathe, we're going to be fine. It might be a little bit different timeline. I still think it's going to be the biggest financial book of all time. But that doesn't happen in 1 week or 2 weeks or even 2 months. And so we put all these artificial deadlines on us that nobody else cares about but us. And we have to ask, why are we putting this deadline on ourselves? Do we have capacity? Is there breathing room? Is it what we really want? We're here at Free Flow looking to reinvent the game of business, to be one of ethics and co-creation, collaboration, and production being measured in fulfillment and money, not just money alone. So that's when you find your flow. I've been doing these webinars recently on intellectual property DNA. If you've been around me, you've heard me talk about investor DNA quite often. But intellectual property DNA, when people, they always ask Corey, like, oh, should I do a podcast? Or they'll ask him, hey, what do you think about this marketing thing? It depends. Who are you and how do you like to create? I look at the things I abandoned over time because it wasn't part of my IP DNA. It's not how I like to create. I love to write. So why not write? I don't love to interview people, but I love to go back and forth with someone. Like if Corey and I do a YouTube video, we have fun. We go back and forth. We could tease each other. Like I don't want to interview. I want to go back and forth. So I'm learning my IP DNA, which is going to be able to create more content and more flow instead of sitting down with and like doing what everybody else is doing. Even if it's like, what if you made a little bit less doing your IP DNA than doing what everybody else told you, but you had more time to yourself, you enjoyed your business a little bit more, you had less stress and your health got better. I'm not even saying it's either or. I'm just saying that we get so stuck in society telling us what to do and what's important, and what everybody else is doing is what we should copy. And if we check the boxes, here's the deal. You check the boxes and you get disappointed because you find out if you didn't love the work, if you didn't design a game worth winning, that it's all losing in the end. You get the outcome without the fulfillment. Society wants to shortcut fulfillment. They want to get rid of the things that we love the most because of outcomes. If we're addicted to outcomes and not fulfilled in the process, we lose. And the higher the stakes are, the harder it is to see. The more identity is wrapped up in something to prove to something else, the more blinders we have. Why do things take off in culture? There's so much unresolved emotion that humanity has. Unprocessed, unrecognized. They're sitting there in pain. They're afraid to speak up. They don't have courage. They don't want to be judged, so they hold back. They complain about things. Like a lot of times when we complain about politicians or we complain about the news, it's because we don't want to deal with real things going on in our life that we see and touch every day, right? So it's easy to get in that external global situation. And this is how I feel Money Unmasked is what I'm going to unveil here is there's things in that book that are bold and important that people haven't said, but they've thought. And the way it takes off in culture is when it's been given voice to the unspoken and the voiceless. And so as you're creating your business, as you're creating your tribe and your community, the more you can see and hear them and get deeper with them to know what's really at the core, the more you'll speak into the culture and culture will take it over and do it with you. So it's not just about effort. It's about boldness. It's about courage. The people that we admire the most, I think, are the most vulnerable. They share so much of their life that they feel so real. And you're like, are they the most articulate? Maybe not. Are they even the best looking? Maybe not. Are they the smartest? Definitely not, because sometimes intellect gets in the way of authenticity. So what happens when you give a voice to the voiceless with your business is people feel seen, felt, and heard. And they want to be around you because you show them a part of themselves that no one else allowed them to see. Today's topic is not really about pain, it's about intimacy. And the more intimate we could be with each other, where we're sharing the things that nobody else talks about, and we're willing to open up about the struggles that we've had or are currently having, or the losing games that we played or that we're currently playing, or the fears and inadequacies. Yesterday, like I think it was the first time on a discovery session I said, every time we go into an immersion, there's moments of doubt that I have of what if this is the time I can't do it? Like I have someone I'm really close to that's like, I really am messed up with my money map. I'm wealthy, but I feel broke. And I'm like, man, what if I can't get her there? And what I realize is that's only when it's making it about me and it's about my ego and about getting the credit instead of bearing witness to someone feeling safe enough to express the things. And I don't really have to do the work. If we have vulnerability, a safe space, we have trust, we get to that intimacy, which leads to breakthrough, and we finally feel connected. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And if you're enjoying these videos, well, there's good news. More where that came from. So go ahead and click through and watch the next video now.